The Empire's mistake. The galaxy had never been kind to the small, the weak, or the stubborn. For millennia, the Galactic Empire had ruled with iron and plasma, its fleets blotting out suns, its armies burning resistance into ash. World after world bent the knee, some with broken spirits, others with broken bodies. To the Empire, conquest was not a question of if, only when. So when their long-range surveys detected the chatter of human transmissions leaking into the stars, when their scouts observed crude but rapid expansion into the Sol system's outlying worlds, they dismissed humanity as another nuisance. Another species too arrogant to know its place. Another people destined to kneel. The Emperor's decree was short, almost perfunctory. Extend the banner of dominion to Sol. Demand submission. If they refuse, erase them. The envoy arrived in orbit over Earth with all the pomp of imperial arrogance. His warship, 3 kilometers long, cast a shadow over the blue planet below. He spoke not with diplomacy, but decree, his words broadcast simultaneously in every major human language. People of Earth, you will surrender sovereignty. You will provide resources and soldiers for the Empire's wars. You will recognize your place beneath us. Refuse, and your world will burn. There was silence at first, stunned disbelief rippling across the nations of Earth. Humanity had long speculated on alien life, but never expected its first contact to come as an ultimatum of slavery. Politicians convened, militaries scrambled, civilians panicked. But in that chaos, something rare happened, something the Empire had never anticipated. Humanity agreed, not to surrender, but to fight. For the first time in recorded history, the fractured nations of Earth spoke with one voice. From Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Nairobi, from Delhi to Sao Paulo, the decision was unanimous. Not one leader dared bow their head. Not one army prepared to disarm. The United Earth Council broadcast the reply, a message carried back to the envoy's fleet with cold defiance. We are not your subjects. Come and take it. The Empire did not hesitate. Their fleet swept into the solar system like a storm. Mars colonies were glassed within hours. Orbital stations burned like kindling. Human warships, outdated, fragile things compared to Imperial dreadnoughts, were torn apart in brutal displays of superiority. Billions watched in horror as humanity's first interstellar war began with disaster. But in the midst of that slaughter, something sparked. On Earth, conscription offices overflowed with volunteers. Engineers worked without sleep, converting mining lasers into weapons. Hackers tunneled into alien transmissions, probing for weaknesses. Soldiers prepared for a war they knew they should not survive, but refused to lose. The Empire thought the war would be quick, a lesson in obedience. A single campaign to remind the galaxy that resistance was futile. Instead, they had lit a fire. Humanity had been many things, violent, divided, reckless, but it had never been obedient. And as the first Imperial bombs fell upon Earth's defenses, a single truth settled across both species. The Empire had made a mistake. They had declared war on humanity. And in doing so, they had signed their end. The resistance awakens. The first weeks of war were brutal. Mars lay in ruins, its domes shattered, its survivors choking on thin air and dust. Orbital habitats around Jupiter had been reduced to glowing debris fields. Earth's navies, armed with railguns and missile frigates, had been torn apart by weapons so advanced they seemed like gods striking mortals. By every measure of power, humanity should have broken. But instead, humanity adapted. Where the Empire was rigid, humans improvised. Where the Empire relied on overwhelming force, humans turned to ingenuity. Every setback became a lesson, every defeat a blueprint for resistance. The first sparks of hope came from Titan. An Imperial fleet moved to secure Saturn's largest moon, expecting no resistance. Instead, they found a trap. Miners, engineers, and ex-soldiers had converted the moon's vast industrial complexes into weapons factories. Massive gas harvesting stations were refitted with crude particle cannons, while swarms of mining drones were armed with explosives and cloaked in Titan's methane haze. When the Imperial fleet approached, the miners struck. Drones hurled themselves at warships in suicidal waves, detonating against hulls. Crude particle cannons lanced through the void. Human frigates, battered but still defiant, darted between the chaos, delivering railgun salvos into the confusion. By the time the smoke cleared, 3 Imperial cruisers burned, and the survivors fled. Titan held. Humanity had its first true victory. Word of Titan spread like wildfire across Earth. For the first time since the war began, despair gave way to defiance. Volunteers poured into recruitment centers. Hackers hijacked Imperial communications, seeding disinformation. Engineers pushed themselves to exhaustion, stripping wreckage from destroyed warships and reverse engineering alien technology. One captured cruiser became a turning point. Its command deck was a labyrinth of alien design, its systems meant to resist tampering. But human stubbornness prevailed. Within weeks, the ship was not only operational, but crewed by humans who flew it with reckless creativity. The Empire's captains, drilled in doctrine and rigid formations, found themselves outmaneuvered by humans who treated combat like a deadly game of improvisation. On Earth, the United Council became a true war government. Old rivalries and grievances dissolved under the weight of survival. Russian engineers collaborated with American coders. Chinese strategists worked alongside Indian tacticians. African and South American industries ramped up to supply the war. Humanity, fractured for centuries, found unity in defiance. The Empire could not comprehend it. Their history was littered with species that either submitted or perished. None had ever fought with such creativity, such irrational determination. What should have been a swift campaign had become a festering wound in their pride. By the end of the war's first year, humanity was no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for victory. Titans stood unbroken, Earth was hardened but defiant, and the stars whispered of the Terran resistance. The Empire had thought us weak. Instead, they had taught humanity how to fight an empire and win. Breaking the Empire, what began as a desperate defense soon turned into a counteroffensive. Humanity, once blooded and cornered, had learned how to bleed the Empire in return. The strategy was simple: never fight them where they were strongest. Instead, strike where they were vulnerable. Convoys carrying supplies through lightly defended lanes vanished into ambushes. Orbital refueling stations exploded from sabotage. Human strike teams smuggled aboard captured freighters, infiltrated Imperial shipyards and crippled production lines. Everywhere the Empire looked, humanity was there, unpredictable, relentless, and impossible to crush. The most audacious blow came at the Orion Gate, one of the Empire's largest interstellar transit hubs. A fleet of Imperial warships gathered to secure the system, confident that humanity would never dare strike such a fortress. But humans had long since abandoned caution. They seeded the system with nuclear mines, concealed in the debris fields of shattered moons. They unleashed waves of automated drones, programmed with deceptive electronic signals to scramble Imperial sensors. When the fleet moved to engage what it thought were human ships, the mines detonated in chain reactions that tore through hulls. Then, out of the chaos, real human warships surged forward, both Earth-built frigates and captured Imperial cruisers, crewed by men and women who had no fear of death. The battle raged for hours. Imperial doctrine demanded rigid formations, perfect lines, coordinated volleys. Humanity shredded those formations with reckless charges, feints, and desperate maneuvers no sane officer would ever order. By the time it ended, the Orion Gate fleet was reduced to wreckage, its survivors limping home. The Empire had lost not just ships, but its aura of invincibility. And humanity was no longer fighting alone. Across the stars, whispers of resistance turned to action. Worlds enslaved for centuries saw in humanity's defiance a spark of hope. Alien species long broken by imperial chains began to rise. Some smuggled weapons to human forces. Others openly revolted, turning the Empire's armies inward as rebellion spread like wildfire. The Terran Rebellion, they called it. For the first time in generations, the Empire faced a war it could not easily control. Its fleets were overstretched, its admirals divided, its Senate paralyzed by fear. Humanity had not just resisted, they had ignited a galaxy-wide uprising. Back on Earth, morale soared. The names of battles like Titan and Orion Gate became rallying cries. Children in ruined cities played at being starship captains. Soldiers tattooed the words "No chains" on their arms. Even in the face of staggering losses, humanity pressed forward with a grim kind of joy. They were no longer prey. They were hunters, and the Empire, for all its might, was beginning to fracture. World by world, system by system, humanity was breaking the chains of the galaxy. And with each victory, the truth became undeniable. The Empire had unleashed something it could not contain. The war was no longer about Earth's survival. It was about the Empire's end. The end they chose. The war that was meant to last weeks had stretched into years. What began as a single campaign of conquest had become the Empire's slow death by 1,000 cuts. Their fleets were still vast, their armies still innumerable, but their unity was gone. Entire sectors had erupted in rebellion, their subjects emboldened by humanity's defiance. The Emperor could not accept it. His throne, forged on centuries of domination, trembled. To restore his pride, he summoned the mightiest fleet ever assembled. Thousands of warships gathered in the core, enough firepower to shatter worlds. His command was clear: crush the Terrans, annihilate their allies, and erase the stain of resistance from history. Humanity knew what was coming. Scouts reported the Armada's movements, its inevitable push toward the heart of rebel space. The United Earth Council made a decision that stunned even their own people. They would not wait to be hunted. They would strike first, straight into the core. The plan was madness. To assault the Empire's throne world was to hurl a stone at a star. But madness had become humanity's way of war. And so the fleets gathered, earthborn frigates scarred by battle, captured Imperial dreadnoughts now crewed by reckless Terrans, ragtag squadrons of alien rebels who had nothing left to lose. The final campaign began at the edge of the core, where Imperial defenses stood like a wall of fire. Humanity shattered that wall with everything they had. Asteroid-sized kinetic projectiles launched at near-light speed, swarms of kamikaze drones, electronic warfare that turned Imperial targeting into chaos. Every inch forward was bought with blood and steel. Then came the Battle of Solaria, the capital system itself. The Emperor's fleet, vast and disciplined, clashed with humanity's horde of misfits and rebels. For days, the stars burned. Imperial battleships unleashed storms of plasma, annihilating entire squadrons. Human vessels answered with ambushes, feints, and suicidal charges that tore holes in the Armada's perfect lines. At the heart of the chaos, a captured cruiser carrying a Terran strike team slipped through. Their mission was not to defeat the fleet, but to end the war at its root. They dove through withering fire, losing half their escorts, and pierced the defenses of Solaria Prime, the Emperor's throne world. What followed became legend. Human soldiers, armored in scavenged gear and carrying weapons both alien and crude, stormed the Imperial Palace. They fought through halls drenched in gold and blood, cutting down guards bred for war. At last, they reached the throne room, where the Emperor himself stood, armored and defiant. The duel was brutal, but the end was certain. The Emperor fell, his death broadcast across the core by human hackers. Billions watched their godlike ruler collapse at the hands of those he had sought to enslave. The galaxy erupted. The Empire, built on fear, crumbled without its head. Worlds once chained rose in revolution. Fleets mutinied. Systems declared independence. And through it all, one truth rang clear. It was humanity who had broken the unbreakable. When the Empire declared war on us, they thought it was the beginning of our end. But it was theirs.